Big news. Big news. We talked about it before. GSP is back, and now he's fighting Michael Bisping for the strap.
Yeah, big news 2 days ago, but we haven't been in front of the audience, so I'll agree with you. Listen, I got a couple of feels on that, Joel. I mean, right out of the gate, and you'll recall, that is the fight I predicted. I think you predicted it was going to be Diaz. I predicted that it would be Bisping was the most likely, so good for me, got one right. But I also predicted that I would prefer it be Anderson Silva. That fight was talked about for a long time. George isn't the champ. Anderson isn't the champ. It would make good timing-wise sense to get that done. Business-wise makes good sense. You had then brought up Conor McGregor's name. Well, that would be the biggest fight in the history of the sport. I liked that as well, and I think Conor's crazy enough to do it, and I know George would do it. So then I started to think, well, maybe it's going to go in that direction. I know George specifically wanted to fight Bisping. World title fight, different weight class, a lot of meaning on that. And he likes the matchup. Bisping really wants to fight George St. Pierre because the way his contract is structured as being champion, I mean, he's staring, if I was even to tell you how many millions of dollars down the pike on the back end on pay-per-view bonuses, it'd blow your mind. So Bisping wanted that fight too, and I know that they did their level best to politic and to get it. I'm excited for the match. The return of George St. Pierre is exciting. In the wake of the matches that we just discussed and hypothesized about, George St. Pierre, the parody of him and Anderson Silva finally happening. The parody of George St. Pierre versus Conor McGregor finally happening. The greatest of all time versus the greatest of this time. Really, really big business and really compelling matchups. Of those matchups, this is the least intriguing to me as far as getting a buzz and excitement and wanting to know where it is. I think it was interesting that this broke on SportsCenter. I think it was interesting that this broke 48 hours ago. And nowhere without a search can you find a story about this. It has been buried that far down on all of the MMA sites. They are going to need to spend a lot of money and do a lot of promotion to make this a mega fight. This is a big fight either way. I'm not pissing on this fight. In fairness, as far as the matchups that we thought we could have, this one's a little bit weird, and it's also interesting in that, what is George's play? Not what is George telling the guys in the office to get his way and get this done. What is his actual mindset? If he was to capture a 185-pound championship, and all I can do, anytime we sit down here and speculate and guess, is put myself in his shoes and think, what would I do? And then assume that the other guy is going to do that same thing. So if you take George St. Pierre, does he like the matchup with Bisping? Yeah. George, most effective MMA wrestler to have ever done it against Bisping, who's not a wrestler. I think that George really likes that. Middleweight championship, main event, big money fight. George likes all of those things. Does George like the next step should he become the champion? Does he want to fight a guy like Yoel Romero, who is just simply huge in comparison to George? George is a welterweight and even talked about being a lightweight. George's words was that I might come back at lightweight. Now, I think that's where some of the Conor talk came in. George has never speculated about going up to 185. In fact, when it was discussed that he would go to 185, it was done one time for one opponent, which was Anderson Silva, and George said he's just too big. If I'm going to do that fight, I need an ample amount of time. I need to sign a contract, and then that fight needs to be 10 months away so that I can change my body and get big enough for that fight. He didn't like it. So, take Bisping out. Let's say George beats him and gets past him. Does George want to fight Yoel Romero? Does he want to fight Jacare? Does he want to fight Chris Weidman, who could be a light heavyweight today? Does he want to fight Gegard Mousasi, who up until 15 months ago was a light heavyweight, and as much as 36 months ago was even in the heavyweight division over in Japan? Does he want to fight with those guys, or is this a case where he comes in, he grabs the money, he solidifies his legacy, not that it was ever in question, but he solidifies it in absolute stone and walks away? And I think that's where a chess player is taking a gamble.
I think that, when this news broke, I said, okay, you called this, and then you were like, that's not the biggest fight in the world. And I said, well, wow, you're missing if he's fighting for the title and he wins, then he'll face Conor for this. And you laughed at me. You were like, no, he's not gonna bypass 170. And then I've had a couple days to think about this, and I'm like, you know what? let me speculate, and what probably happened is I said this was probably the third fight. It was Conor was the first one, Diaz was the second one, and this was the third one, and was probably going to be at 180 pounds. And then the UFC, because I believe, just like you said, that GSP has no interest in fighting those other monsters. No interest at all. But he does have an interest in this fight. Said, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll do it at 185 instead of 180. He already knows where he's going, and that we know if he's back, the fight to make at some point is him and Conor. And that's probably where it's going.
Yeah, and I think you're left field on that, man. I don't understand why you ever predicted it would be George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz. There's no calling for that fight. There's no draw in that fight. There's no need to see that fight again. The first fight wasn't overly close. If you're just looking to sell some tickets, both of those guys sell tickets, so why put them together? Send Nick this direction and George in a different direction. Do 2 pay-per-views. You're going to do 900,000 to 1.1 with either one of those guys. So why put them together and still do the 900 to 1.1 in an insignificant fight that's not for a title or even a title contender? I never understood why you were predicting Nick Diaz, other than I know you're a big Nick fan and wanted to see that match. But as far as the Conor thing goes, I think you're out in left field on that one too. Your original prediction to me privately was that George goes out, he beats Bisping, then him and Conor fight. I'm going, well, Joel, that doesn't make any kind of sense. You had a little bit of a storyline when Conor goes from 45 to 55 and is successful, but he then can't go to 85. He'd have to stop by 170 first and be successful and then go up to 85. And even then it's a stretch, but it can be done. There's just simply no storyline here. If George goes and grabs the 85-pound title and then you want to make this mega fight with him and Conor, you could do it. You could throw him at 170 just to do it. It wouldn't hurt the 55-pound title, but it would hurt the 85-pound title should George lose. I think we're just talking crazy land there. That doesn't make any kind of sense. The most reasonable conclusion that you would have here is if George was to go out and beat Bisping, George is not going to want to fight some of those monsters that are cutting down to 185. George is 193 pounds the last time I worked out with him, and he's not in training camp. He's going to walk around about 187 once he's fully in shape, and that's going to be as simple as go to bed the night before weigh-ins and don't eat anything until you get off of the scale. He's not going to have to sweat out a single ounce, and some of those guys are just so big. And George has been in the workout room with Chris Weidman and trained with him, and it did just fine. I'm not saying he had any problems there, but what I'm saying is he does understand that there's a size difference, and I just don't predict that he'd want to run it back. And there's no reason for him to. He's got a ton of money. He's got a ton of fame. He's got a ton of memories and experiences. And if he can go get that 185-pound belt, and it is a good matchup for him. That's not to say that I even predict him as a winner. I mean, let's let this play out a little bit longer, but it is a good matchup for him.
Tomorrow's card, UFC 209. Do you think GSP will be there?
Yeah, I imagine George will be there. Yeah, right in the front row.
Okay.
Looking great. He'll have a suit and a new haircut.
And your 3 picks.
Hey, where's that fight at? Are they fighting? They're fighting in Vegas.
They're fighting in Vegas.
T-Mobile.
Yep.
T-Mobile Arena. My 3 picks. Okay, well, let's see here. The Wonder Boy fight is really hard because Wonder Boy is really hard. That's a weird style, and I can go back to my time when Machida was making his run through it. The biggest problem with Machida, and I had 2 teammates fight him, in Dan Henderson and Randy Couture, and the biggest problem with Machida is you get one crack at him. You can't practice for that. There was nobody that we could find to bring into the gym to spar, with Randy or spar with Dan when they were getting ready, that could do Machida. He had such a unique and bizarre style that you get one crack to get out there, see some of those movements, test the timing, defend them, and get your own offense off. And as the fights go on, the guys that were able to make it some rounds with Machida, they did start doing better and better. They did start to figure him out. I think we saw that with Tyron. Tyron had a very hard open with Thompson, as everybody has, but he did start to do a little bit better as the fight progressed. I think that's a major thing in Tyron's advantage. Now that mask is off. Now that unpredictability and uniqueness is off, and it will help him. The bottom line is he's still in there with a killer. So I think that, I think Tyron won that first fight. I understand that it was ruled a draw. Tyron brings up the point, well, I knocked him down 4 times. He brings that up in every interview he does, but he's right. That's fair. He did knock him down 4 times, and he did it later in the round. I think that was the 4th round. So we did start to feel him and start to find his timing and range. I think that's going to help Tyron a lot. Who wins that fight? I don't know if I'm ready to make a prediction. If you're going to hold my feet to it, I'm going to go with Tyron. But I'm not overly confident. That is a really tough guy in Wonder Boy with a really unique style. Now, I do like Overeem over Hunt. I don't love that Hunt is in a lawsuit with the UFC. I don't love where his head's at. I don't love all the complaining that he's done. I don't know that helps him or hurts him. I think that's a really hard match. I think Hunt is going to be able to stay focused longer than Overeem. Overeem loses his focus a little bit. He comes out on a sprint. But overall, Overeem's just got more tools, in my opinion. I also like the Rashad fight versus Kelly. That's not getting any kind of attention. There's another fight on the card. What one am I missing?
Khabib versus Ferguson.
Oh, gosh, of course. Interesting fight. I've been on the Ferguson bandwagon before anybody else was because I was in the room with him at the Reign Training Center. I got to see him on a daily basis. And I saw how good he was. I watched him wear out some big names, some UFC stars. He wore them out. They could not keep up. They had to go sit down and could not finish workouts. And Ferguson standing in the middle waiting for somebody else to come in. Khabib is a whole nother deal because he's a one-dimensional guy, but he does that dimension better than anybody. And if Khabib can get on top, he can cause some problems. But Ferguson does have some very unique jiu-jitsu with that 10th planet system. Can he keep up with the pace, and can he push through the damage? Ferguson's going to take some major damage on bottom. Can he sustain it? Nobody else has been able to. Nobody else has even been close. And I think you have to look at that. Khabib has one big problem when he fights, and it's with his left hand. He puts his left hand in the wrong position, and it's about 1 inch underneath his chin. And if you're coming in from that left side, you've got a wide open target, which if Khabib ever meets with Conor, you better believe, because if Conor can do anything, he can game plan. Conor can come out with game plans and strategies better than anybody. And if Khabib kept that left hand up 2 inches higher, I'd feel great about him. I feel good about him now. 23 men have tried to take him, and 23 have made a slip. He has a perfect record of 23-0, but he needs to keep that left hand up. Sooner or later, he's going to get popped, and he's going to go to sleep.
All right. Well, we were actually in Vegas. We were going back and forth on who I would pick between Woodley and Thompson. Well, when I was at the window, I chose Woodley. I got Woodley, Khabib, and Mark Hunt.
Okay, and what one are you feeling the least confident in? I mean, are you like me that Wonder Boy and Woodley could go either way? And we've got good reason for saying that. I mean, the guys just fought, and they went to a draw. So we've got a historical reference to look back on of just how close these guys are. I mean, is that the one where you really think, no, Wonder Boy's got him, or are you going, yeah, I really don't know, but this is who I bet on?
Yes, you're right, 100%. I don't know. It's the obvious answer is whoever learned more from the last fight. If I'm coaching Woodley, I'm like, go give him everything you got from the second the bell rings, and you're in a 2 to 3 round fight. T. Woodley even said, hey, I watched how this guy fight. I had a plan. I followed through with my plan entirely, and I would just say, man, you're a killer. Just go be a killer.
Yeah,
but that's why I don't coach.
Well, I tell you, that's one thing that Woodley won't do. Woodley's a slow starter at times. If he sees his range, he steps in and he unleashes, right? We saw him do that to win the championship, with Robbie Lawler. But if he doesn't see that opening that he's looking for, he's very patient. He'll stand back. He'll listen to people boo. He'll do whatever he needs to do. He's looking for very specific openings, and finding those particularly with a guy like Stephen Thompson, it's rare. There's not a lot of openings. That's a really weird style. I like how Tyron trained. I like that he brought in Sage Northcutt. I really think that he did a lot of things well, but it's a close fight. I just have to acknowledge that. And the one thing that Thompson did for this fight is he put on about 10 pounds of muscle. Where he thought he was getting out muscled or why he would need that, I'm not sure, but you got to work really hard to do that. So, look, we got a good fight on our hands. We got a really good fight on our hands.